Hello and welcome to the second session of the NASCIO 2020 Mid-Year Webcast Series. I'm Dennis Goulet, NASCIO President and Commissioner for the state of New Hampshire. For those of you who didn't join the first session, I have a little bit of housekeeping to go over before I introduce the panel. First, because of our environments may not be the norm right now, with many of us working from home, all participants are muted and will be throughout the session. You can submit questions for the speakers in the sidebar panel. All sessions will be recorded and posted to nascio.org by the end of this week. After the session, and any time over this week, we invite all members to visit the virtual networking lounge on the NASCIO community. This is the place to talk about session content, share resources, ask for advice, or just say hello to your colleagues. You should have received details about that group and how to gain access in an email on what to know for a successful event. If you need any help, please email Emily Lane on the NASCIO team at elane@nascio.org. She will get your question to the correct person for a quick answer. This next session stems from a publication released in January of this year on state and local government cybersecurity collaborations. NASCIO's Director of Policy and Research, Meredith Ward, authorized the publication with Maggie Bruner, the Program Director for the Homeland Security and Public Safety Division of the National Governors Association. Meredith and Maggie will talk with North Carolina about the way in which the state is partnering with local governments. Please welcome Meredith and Maggie, along with Maria Thompson, State Chief Risk Officer for North Carolina, and Randy Kress, CIO of Rowan County, North Carolina. Speakers, take it away.
Thank you, Dennis, and kudos to you for pronouncing Randy's county correctly, because this Kentucky did not. Last week, we call that Rowan County in Kentucky, but we like Randy just the same. So thanks everybody for joining today. I am your armchair expert here from my living room in Lexington, Kentucky, and grateful that Maggie can join us from DC and from the great state of North Carolina, our other two folks today. This is a very strange time that we're living in COVID-19, which is why obviously we're coming to you virtually, but we really do want this session to be not so much about COVID-19, but about something that is very intrinsic in the operations of state government, and that's collaboration with local governments with cybersecurity. So our panel today will be kind of casual. You can ask questions through the chat box, and Julie will send those to me. And as always, hope you find this informative. Julie, we did show the slide with the publication, I believe. That's available on the NASCIO website. And a little bit later on, we'll also show you some recommendations that were in the end of the publication that were made by NGA and NASCIO. But if the panelists, if y'all will take just about 30 seconds and introduce yourself, that would be awesome. And we will start with you, Maggie, my partner in crime.
Thank you for having me. Thanks to NASCIO. I really appreciate the ability to kind of have this conversation together. I'm really thrilled to be here alongside Maria and Randy today too.
Good afternoon, everyone. Maria Thompson from the great state of North Carolina. I'm the State Chief Risk Officer. Looking forward to having this discussion to talk about what we're doing within the state of North Carolina with our local government partners.
Hello, everyone. I'm Randy Kress with Rowan County in North Carolina, Chief Information Officer and recently Assistant County Manager. So look forward to talking.
All right, thank you guys so much. You know, again, we released this publication in January, and what the publication has is about 15 examples of how state and local government are working together in cybersecurity. So we interviewed a lot of states, we collected information. We really wanted to know, especially, you know, 2019 was kind of the year of ransomware, especially hard hitting to local governments. And so we really wanted to know how were states and locals interacting on ransomware, on other issues. And so that's really what we interviewed folks about. And I will say that, you know, we also asked a question in the NASCIO CIO survey, which, you know, we do every single year. We found out about 68% or so of states are offering some sort of services to local government, and cybersecurity is the top category. So it's another reason why we wanted to explore this issue a little bit more and kind of dive deep. And I will say, you know, North Carolina is one of the examples that really stood out to us, which is one of the reasons why we invited Maria and Randy on today. And I think a good example of what can be done, you know, when there's determination kind of on both sides. Maggie, anything I missed there or anything that you want to tee up before we kind of get going?
Yeah, I mean, first off, you know, Meredith, just want to say in terms of publication, I think you really model partnership internally as well. I mean, you had a really great draft and reached out to NGA and asked us to partner with you on it, and I think it just made it so much stronger. One theme I think that came out through us in terms of the takeaways, I know Meredith's going to talk about some of the recommendations later, is just the whole of state approach, particularly the integration with emergency management, homeland security. So thanks to Curtis Wood for kind of teeing this up for us to talk about now, but there are examples sort of peppered throughout the paper where that really is shown in action. You know, Louisiana declares a state of emergency, stands up in EEOC, we talk about that. But not just on the incident response side, also in terms of preparedness and resilience. So great examples like Illinois creating a cyber navigator program to help locals assess their risk and provide them support. Indiana creating a toolkit for local emergency managers. I'm particularly thrilled about this conversation today, though, because North Carolina are alums of an NGA Policy Academy on this very project. And that is kind of our effort to bring together multidisciplinary teams to focus on strategic goals for cyber. We just announced 7. We've got Colorado, Michigan, Mississippi, New York, Oregon, Pennsylvania, and Tennessee this year. But without further ado, I'm really excited to talk to North Carolina because they have this great program that they stood up, and in the spirit of your keynote earlier today, it's time to not just think about COVID, but to celebrate great work that's been going on. So Maria's been doing some really great work.
Oh, thank you, Maggie.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more on that. The keynote was nice, 5 minutes, and I loved it. So Maria and Randy, tell us a little bit about how what the program is, so what we're talking about, and how it got started, what it looks like today. And you guys kind of go back and forth and talk about whatever you want to talk about.
Sure, Meredith. Thank you, and thank you, Maggie. And I think you guys teed it up really well because literally what we do here is it's all about partnerships. And it really started with the NGA Policy Academy. I was new to the state, and you know, when you're new to any organization, it's hard to understand who are the players, who are the key players that you need to be tapping into. And so in 2018, I was very happy when we were accepted as part of the NGA Policy Academy, because that really was the stepping stone to where we are today in this whole of state approach to cybersecurity that we've taken on. It started with the Policy Academy, as I mentioned. We identified 2 key areas that we thought were crucial for us within the state, the biggest gaps that we had. And one was the need for a statewide incident response plan or disruption plan, if you will. And the other point that we wanted to really focus on was how do we tweak our cyber laws to get them a little bit closer to where we needed them to be. And those were the 2 key points and initiatives that we focused on during the NGA Policy Academy. Now, as you all know, if you've ever participated in this, one of the key things that you have to do when you participate in the Policy Academy is to identify who are the stakeholders that you want to be in that meeting. And I honestly didn't know anyone within the local government. And so I relied heavily as we look to build in those folks, to reach out to those folks that are going to be part of the process. I leveraged our DPS folks, our public safety folks, because they had the relationship through emergency management. And one of the key folks that they mentioned was Randy, who's on the call. They worked with him in the past. They knew he was one of the go-to folks within local government, and that was always receptive and was always supportive of state initiatives. So one of the key things we did was we looked for those evangelists, those people of influence within the local county to be part of the working group, because we knew that would help us to get closer to where we needed to be. So Randy and a couple of other local county reps were part of that discussion, along with our emergency management folks, our other key players, other state agencies that were part of that, and our federal partners. And we came together and we came up with what our plan would be on how to establish the disruption plan and what it needed to look like. And then once we started teasing through the disruption plan, we identified that what we wanted to figure out, what were the roles and responsibilities of each of the playing partners. And that's when we started to figure out, oh, we heard about this group called the IT Strike Team that Randy was one of the leaders of, and what they did within the local government as far as whenever there was a natural disaster, how they were able to come together and mutually support a county that may be in need. And so we wanted to leverage that relationship that was already there instead of creating something new for cyber, because we knew that these folks within the local county, they have the subject matter expertise and they have the willingness to help each other, mutually support each other. So it's been really a great relationship between us since then. In 2018, right around the time when we're wrapping up the Cyber Policy Academy, we had our first ransomware attack within one of the counties, and they were there with us. And that's when we started to say, oh, okay, so there is a benefit. It's not just us and the National Guard guys that are going in and supporting these local counties. We had local folks that were trusted within the local counties that they could that would be part of our team to go in and assist them in in their response and recovery activities. And then followed on in 2019 was when we really got hit hard. We had we had 7 ransomware activities or incidents that happened within local counties and school systems that we were part of. And out of the 7, 5 of those, we had our NCLGISA, and I apologize for that. That's the North Carolina Local Government Information Systems Association. Hopefully I got that correct.
That is perfect.
Awesome. So the NCLGISA team, IT Strike Team, they were with us lockstep. In many occasions, they were first boots on the ground before even the National Guard guys were able to be deployed to support the local counties. But out of the 7 that we had, which one of them was really one of the largest ones we had to deal with, which impacted a school system where we had 18 sites that were impacted. They were there with us from day one, helping with identifying what the processes were to recover, helping them to configure their devices, helping them to figure out what the best plan of attack and walk them through that entire recovery and remediation process. So we definitely could not have done that without them. And you may have heard me talk about this before, and I apologize that this may sound repetitive from previous discussions that we had, but I wanted to make sure that our local partners, and they are truly partners, are part of the discussion, and they get highlighted on everything that they do, because they are absolutely crucial to everything that we do within the local government. Last year, we spent a lot of time trying to put our face out there and get to know the local county members, the county commissioners. They were part of that process. They're looked at as trusted, so that they sort of that relationship with us, with the other partners that may look at us as big brother. And I think that we've made leaps and bounds in the past year in building those relationships. And as part of that, we were also, and you may have heard me talk about this in other venues as well, we're also helping the local counties by giving them visibility that they may not necessarily have had in the past, such as with the deployment of eye sensors on their infrastructure to help with the block and tackling of the threats that are coming at them. We understand that they are under-resourced, and so we want to give them another tool to help them in their protections of their environment. And we also have BitSight, which is a security scoring mechanism that helps to also give them a little bit more insights into what's going on. So it's not just a relationship based on you will report to us, or we only step in whenever there is an incident. It's also about us helping them with tools that they may not necessarily have had in their toolkit to get them to where they need to be, and so we can all protect ourselves from a whole of state approach. So I'm going to stop talking right now, because I want Randy to have most of the time here, because I don't think he's had the opportunity to be in this type of venue and speak about what all the good work that they've been doing and they continue to do within the local counties. Randy?
Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Maggie. And Meredith as well. Yeah, and then listening to some of the different pieces, I'll start back. Maggie had mentioned this with working with emergency management. And I'll first clarify with just the Nickel-GISA and the association to give that other side too of where I come from is, being CIO of Rowan County. That's one thing. We have a similar association to NASCIO, except at a state level for local government IT. And I've been part of that since 2001 and very active. We have multiple conferences per year, and that's how internally within the state of North Carolina, local IT, counties, municipalities, we also have K-12 and state government as well, but we start understanding and building that trust relation. So that's been happening over, a course of now 18, 19 years. I've given several presentations. I've gone through, different things from security awareness way back when and trying to figure out how we would do security best practices. And then we always kind of tend to change, and whether we take federal or state recommendations and then realize what we can and can't recreate ourselves, and why should we in certain cases. And so that's how this internal, networking works with North Carolina, and why we have such good relations when events do happen. So there's that backstory. And then also working with state agencies, we started working during hurricane. North Carolina is prone for hurricane season, and so emergency management, and developed a strike team, not initially for cyber responses, but more to assist during, hurricane and doing that mutual aid support. So a lot of my initial responses and part of the team that are made up of those IT members throughout the state have gone to different state agencies, and that's the regional locations, and supported, our eastern branch whenever we had Hurricane Matthew in Florence. So there's been a lot of response there in building that relation with emergency management. And over that time of responding and building that relation with North Carolina Emergency Management, we start hearing, and Maria mentioned reaching out to stakeholders. And so, there's always this, standpoint from a local perspective, and we're hearing about a state program, the NGA and the policy. Okay, let's go find out how this impacts both, my county, what it would do for, I'm also on the board for Nickel-GISA, so I look out for the interest of the counties and municipals as well that are on there as well. So how can I assist and be part of that and represent locals? So there was a lot of parallels that appeared to be forming with the same process that we had with emergency management, now with Department of IT as it looked to cyber. And what was interesting in Rowan County's standpoint is, Maria, you also had EM there, I remember as well. And so we had Will there with emergency management. We'd already kind of established some relations and started learning, okay, well, this is also an EM related issue. So it was very well received from my standpoint to understand how I was a stakeholder. Maria brought all that together. As I mentioned to Maria, it's like at first I didn't know, you don't know your state partners until you start meeting people. And that really, I know we're doing everything virtual right now, but it really does mean a lot to be brought into, a discussion, really start understanding and being part of that process, because it's not what you go through from a local perspective on a day in, day out basis. So seeing what that impact was, how the policy was written, especially as we had the significant cyber incident response, because we're looking at it, from a county perspective, saying, yeah, everybody has a different thought of what that reporting mechanism is. Who do we contact above and beyond? And a lot of it really started with peer-to-peer communications. Your neighbor that's having an incident in the middle of the night is going to pick up the phone and call you because you've got that relation. You meet with them for lunch every so often, things like that. So, and that is, as to Maria's point, different than a relation with either a state or a federal partner. So clearly that was a great move. Really appreciate Maria's efforts there to extend that welcome into the larger fold. And as we definitely refer to it, and I know the National Guard and Maria also as well, says one team. And that's truly what we've developed is looking at it from a holistic approach and say a one team effort.
You guys have given us such good information. I have many, many questions, but I'll just throw out one. You know, when Maggie and I were talking to CISOs and states and in my work before that, you know, there's two things that states would say, you know, if I ask, do you have a relationship or do you offer services? Do you interact with local governments? And two reasons why states would say, you know, no, we really don't. And the first one of those is we don't have the money to do so. That is difficult. You know, most states are chargeback or, you know, hybrid. Some states have some general fund or set aside dollars, but most states are some form of chargeback. So how do you bake in that funding when you are 100% chargeback? You can't charge, you know, agencies for work you might do with local governments. So, Maria, can you talk about that a little bit? How is the program funded? How you might have overcome some of those funding obstacles, if there were any?
So I would say funding is always a problem and it's never going to go away. And we have been very successful and pleased beyond belief with the support that I've received from the previous Secretary of IT, which was Secretary Boyette, before he left, and now with Secretary Dokes. And it truly is. And I know everyone that's been in cyber IT has heard this as a top-down support, that you can't do anything without top-down support. I think that has helped tremendously in getting us the funding that we've needed. Sadly, it's not recurring, which is what we're working on right now, making sure that it becomes a recurring budget line item. But it's gotten so much visibility through the ransomware attacks that we've received, that we've unfortunately been participating in 2019 and actually 2020. Just so for those on the call, 2020 started out with a bang. The month of March, we had 6 ransomware attacks within North Carolina. And every single one of them, our Nicolgiza partners were there with us. So I don't know if COVID was a bad thing or a good thing, but I tell you what, we haven't had one, knock on wood, in April. So I'll just say that, and now May. But going back to the budget, it is a recurring problem for me trying to get that funding line locked down. But I think that in some of the incidents that we've had, because it's been impacting some of the legislators and the key legislators that are part of our IT oversight committee, that's helped with getting us the funding when we've asked for it. So obviously, if anyone's familiar with North Carolina and on our budget cycle right now, we are still operating on a 2018 budget. We did not get a 2019 budget, but our initiatives were still funded. And I look for money wherever it exists, whether it's federal. We've leveraged our DHS FEMA grant process to get some of the sensors funded, as well as within the state. And something that I didn't cover today, but I've covered in previous discussions, is we're also funding out of our internal funds, IT, the National Guard team to go to the local counties, and they have a rolling schedule where they're going through all the counties and doing assessments, helping them hopefully in a proactive way to get their network more secure, so as not to have to be impacted by a ransomware or any other kind of cyber incidents. So I know that's a long story to go all the way around to say that we don't have the funding solidified, but the process it's working for us right now, and we're getting that. And I hope to, for 2020 and the future, to get a hard budget line item for this. Now, the good thing is with the Nicolgiza team, they have a different funding line that they can tap into for the support that they're giving. And I'll let Randy speak to that. But it's again, we look for money. I look for money wherever it exists, and we pull it together, and we've been successful in what we've been doing. Randy?
Right, and Marie, I'll agree with you. From my observations and seeing what you're doing, you're being very creative. Anytime you're coming up with new solutions, and I really think that's the way I see it, is as you go through the projects and products that we're looking at, how we do things, where the need is, you're making it work, and I really appreciate that. That's my takeaway from how I see it. from the state perspective, because I know your funding sources are, different, and we've worked with some of that with the EM and FEMA grant funding coming through. From the Nickel Jesus standpoint, yes, it's a nonprofit association, and so we do have money that we operate off of on an annualized basis. One of the things that it takes, and we're really appreciative of state partners, National Guard, and we need to do this as well, is you travel. You go to these locations, and it's easy to equate it with this is how linemen work, from energy companies, where they'll go out of state and they'll assist and repair lines and bring up service. That's a lot of what's going on here, but it really does, and what we see this over time, take a special group of individuals that can do that, that can be away from your family, for several days at a time. You never know what's going to happen. It might be a moment's notice, and you really need to be there in the morning, the next morning, but it comes from more of a compassion feel to realize that could be you, and that would be what you're going through. So we offset funding through travel reimbursement as we work through details on how to handle that. We're working with Maria and her group with DIT and also emergency management to try and formalize some of those processes. But again, we're being creative as well. In the beginning, we're looking at it and saying, okay, we'll just buy a block of hotel rooms for 2 weeks. We now know about how long an incident takes, and you learn from every occasion where the funding, it may seem trivial, but the folks that are working 12, 16 hours a day trying to restore and recover, you want to have a meal at the end of the day. There's simple things that kind of encourage response, so that you can decompress and talk about what's going on. So to Maria's point, looking at anything and any different funding sources from our standpoint, being creative in how you tackle it. You don't have to have everything figured out to begin with.
I agree.
Maggie, anything you want to jump in? Any question you want to jump in with?
Yeah, I have a burning question because, Maria, one of the things we hear from a lot of states is they're really kind of jealous of your piece of legislation where you codified that the locals must report a cyber incident to DIT. And Randy, in the prep call, you said you were fully on board with that. So I'd kind of love to hear both your perspectives on what that piece of legislation has done. And then Randy, from you specifically, from the local perspective, why you were on board with that.
Sure, Maggie. So obviously, this was part of the NGA Policy Academy. Again, the second initiative that we wanted to work towards was to modernize our laws. And I was really surprised at the level of support that we received to move this one forward. I anticipated, because I came to a state hearing that in order to change any law, it takes an act of Congress and God has to be involved. This one was actually very easy, and we received literally no pushback. So it was signed into law August of last year. And since then, we've been taking the approach of trying to educate our county commissioners, any of those large organizations where we can get in front of the leaders to let them know about what it is, and also to allay their fears that it's not about Big Brother trying to get into your business. We hopefully successfully educated them that we really just want to help them see where the trends may be with the incidents that are occurring, see where we can lobby on their behalf for funding to support, initiatives to help them in their local counties. And it's not just a matter of, we just want all the information from you so we can either poke you in the face or something like that with it. It is definitely just to help them and focusing on the whole of state. And so when I go in front of these individuals, the first thing that I always focus on and I try to get through to them is, it is a whole of state approach. It's no longer, you cannot no longer work in your own silos of excellence. You have to mutually work with each other. And that's the only way that we can get better, because our data just doesn't sit at the state level. It sits everywhere. And even though we may not have a level of authority to govern, if you will, those entities, that should not stop us from working together as a team. And I think that in the past year and a half, it's definitely gotten better. And we are seeing that more counties are more open to reporting up to us as they see that it's not impacting them in a negative way. And I think with some of the tools that we've mentioned earlier, that, giving them as another carrot, if you will, and not necessarily the stick, helps with our relationships. And, we've most recently, one of our largest counties that typically would want to stand off on their own and do their own thing, they've actually signed on to get a sensor, which was a great win, a huge win for us. And I think it all stems from the partnerships and working with the Nickel-Giza IT strike team, as well as they seeing that, as we've helped other counties, this is what we're trying to do. And it's not us trying to take over the world, because nobody can control that. We cannot control all of state. There's no way that we could do that. I don't know if you have any thoughts, Randy.
Yeah, Maggie, to your point of why I think it's important. I come more from an open security practice and being able to share what you're doing, why you're doing it, be openly critical of what you're doing. I feel that security sometimes has this, veil of secrecy of, well, I know I'm doing it right, but I won't tell anybody how I'm doing it. And it is hard to open up. I mean, we work with, my peers that sometimes feel that way. It is, there's sometimes it comes across as it was an embarrassment. I didn't want it to happen. So that's the reason I don't want to report. And it's like, no, it's not targeted toward you. You're just an IP address. It would happen to anybody. There have been some specific targets, to areas and things like that, but just in general. So that was the reason why I was for a reporting up. There's so many requirements from a county perspective with the different departments and the different types of data we have, whether it's health data that has a different state reporting than, say, criminal justice information that has a reporting to State Bureau of Investigations. So there's so many different channels. And again, when you're looking at, well, how do we come up with an incident response program at a local level, having a formal discussion on how that would happen, where would be the point of contact, narrowing it down, because that's exactly from a local perspective, that confusion that runs through your mind if you're tackling something and at first you think, okay, is this going to be overwhelming? Well, I don't know who to contact. By codifying that in law, it allows that channel to be established and then allows it to grow. And that's exactly what Maria and her team have done, is basically take that. And we have this, I would almost say we could recite it from memory now, what a response looks like. I mean, it's been played out enough. And we're so comfortable with it. At first, it wasn't a comfort level. I mean, we had to work through that. But unfortunately, it didn't stop. As Maria said, 2019 didn't slow down. It just kept going. And then we moved right into 2020. With continuation, it seems like there's a break every once in a while to let people, get a break from the burnout of supporting and helping and getting back home. So that's really one of the reasons for supporting that effort is, to get everybody on the same page, to take down that barrier. And I've heard this from a couple larger organizations, that if that policy doesn't exist, they're not able to take that action because they're going to handle internally. So just having that legislative piece there that says, here's another item you go through, opens that door for some of these other organizations that may try and just manage internally.
And I'd like to add that I'm going to be working on modifying that to include some of our schools, because we've seen that is an area, and we all know that the education community, they're getting slammed as well, but some of our schools tend to feel as though that the law doesn't pertain to them. And I think because they have not necessarily, some of the schools have not gotten hit hard, they are still wanting to operate in their cone of silence and not participate. But I think, again, it's a growing, we're growing, and as we reach into the different sectors, they're starting to see the benefit, but it takes time and it's not overnight. And to what Randy mentioned, I remember the first couple of calls, it tested our disruption plan. That's a living document, if nothing else is. And I think over time, it's grown because we started off with the National Guard, the DI team, the state team, our federal partners as part of the call, Nickel-Giza as part of the call, and that's grown to include some of our, obviously the local EM teams that they were never originally part of the first outreach. But when we start whenever the alert goes out that there's been a ransomware incident, we have a list of folks that are automatically part of the first scoping call. We have a team site that's automatically already, established for communication. We have a protocol that's set. And so I think with every incident, sadly, it has to be an incident, but we learn from every incident and we get better and better. And it becomes to this point where it's, to Randy's point, you can close your eyes and you know what's going to happen and you know what the next steps are. It definitely is like a checklist, a playbook for what we do.
So Randy, I'll direct this one towards you. I know that everyone was dying to know what the second thing that states sometimes said when they wouldn't provide services or get involved with local governments, the reason why. So again, funding, first reason. Second reason is that's just not in their swim lane. This is things that I hear. And you guys covered that a little bit. So Randy, from your perspective, you talked a little bit about this. What advice would you give local governments who either may be resistant to the change of interacting with state government or might not be able to, they don't know where to start to get in touch with their state government? What advice would you give to them?
Sure. From that perspective, communication is definitely key. It's not going to be there, so that's kind of where you have to, if you're local, find out who your different agencies that you work with are. It's going to be natural. There's going to be state departments that you probably have better relations with. Start there, find out who you have and who's responsible for different types of events, who can provide value. I think that's what we're learning over time is, and Maria and her team, the National Guard, once we realize that at first you start saying, okay, well, where's their overlap in services, and what is one department going to do that we can't do? But you figure that out over time, and that's where the communication, and Maria's done this, National Guard's done this, EM has done this, is really just be forthcoming of, look, we're all trying to figure this out. We're trying to figure out how to best help, the citizens of North Carolina. And if you have that open discussion, you realize that, yeah, there are some overlapping swim lanes to begin with, but fortunately you have multiple incidents. You start realizing, okay, well, this is where this swim lane kind of has a stronger suit. Again, we do this, the Nickel-Giza group does this from a volunteer perspective. So we know that we need to rely on, what happens if we don't have the volunteers? What happens, like in our past cases, where if you do have multiple incidents and you're spread thin, you can only get so many people out at a time. So communication is key to anyone. Start that relation building, start having those conversations. I'm overly pleased with the reception on just being able to speak with the state agencies and having response back. And also, I guess, one good piece would be, to my point of working with Nickel-Giza as association, become that liaison as a local. You can't have, in our case, we have 100 counties. You can't have 100 unique individuals coming at a particular time. So over a period of time, develop a few liaisons that can actually have those conversations and kind of reduce that voice down, to a few. I mean, we ended up having to do that. At first, the strike team was designated to only have one leader, and then we realized that you can't do that. I mean, what if you're not available? So we ended up splitting out. We followed the EM emergency management practice and broke into 3 different regions. So there's 3 of us, and we do. I mean, we've gone through it a couple times in some of the responses where one of us will be almost burnt out by the end of a 2-week period. So you have to have multiple from a local level, but communication, understanding that it's not going to be all perfect day one. I mean, but if you don't give up on that, and I think I heard the word determination, that's exactly what it is. I mean, it's coming in and saying, okay, we're going to make this work. we understand that there's multiple players. You recognize that everybody has the right attitude, and everybody's conveying that. And that really, I think we had a call before where it turned into like this snowball effect, where we're starting off slow and then you realize, and now it seems very easy to bring on, whether it's another local or it's another state agency. And we've run into that recently, where we're trying to bring on another state agency to be more of a partner as we have different engagements. The interesting thing from a county perspective is we support all the different, state agencies at the local level. So it goes back to the state level of supporting a lot of different folks. Hope that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. So Maria, I'll flip that back on you. What advice would you give for other state CISOs or others who might be on the webinar who either A, say, not my swim lane, not my job to help local governments, or B, perhaps they have offered assistance to maybe some of the larger cities. Of course, it could happen with any city or county. And the locality really said, I don't need anything that you're offering me. What advice would you give on either of those circumstances?
So I'll say, for those who think that it's not their swim lane, it is. It is. You have to adopt a whole of state approach to cyber, because yes, I understand that it's tough, and there's going to be, you're going to receive pushback. What you have to do, like similar to what we did, is to find an evangelist, somebody that's trusted. I think that's the first step, is to build those relationships with somebody that is in high regard within the local counties. And then they will be that person that can help to break those, build the bridges between you and them. The second thing is, going back to the first thing, really, is you have to, and please take this the nicest way possible, you have to get your head out of the sand. There is absolutely no way that you can protect your environment and your citizens' data. That's our goal. That's our role in life as state CISOs, is to see how we can best protect, work on and best protect our citizens' data. And if our citizens' data reside within the local counties, within the municipals, then that is part of our role. It's a shared risk, but we're, at the end of the day, what is the first thing within our title? It's state. And state doesn't necessarily mean state agency. It means wherever our citizens' data sits. That's our role. And that's how I look at things. I think that it's, and this is just Maria speaking here, I think that we are not doing ourselves a service. We're doing a disservice to the citizens by just taking that myopic approach to just state agencies and what we can control. And it's not something that you can do overnight. It takes time. And it definitely relies heavily on relationships. And I think that's the big thing. And you have to get out there. You have to get in front of your local government. You have to let them know that you're there as a resource. You have to let them know that, yeah, maybe you may not have funding today, but at least get in front of them, in front of their organizations, try to build those relationships, figure out what that is that we can mutually do to support each other. And one of the key things is, and I've learned, is it can't always be through a stick. You have to have some kind of carrots. And even if that carrot is, hey, we're here as consultants, that we can help you through this. We can get on the phone or whatever it is. Use that approach and just keep building those relationships and keep pushing. You have to keep that dialogue open with them. So those are the key things that I would say.
So Julie, if we could put up the recommendations from the publication that NASCIO and GA put out. You guys have really teed this up beautifully, and I know that we had a question or two coming in from the audience about this very thing. So I'll kind of, say a couple that stick out to me, and then Maggie, also want your perspective on this as well. So, we talked about maybe barriers or maybe hesitations that states or locals might have on one side or the other. Talked about funding issues. So again, the number one action here is, at the very minimum, states should be building relationships. And, Maria and Randy, you guys both touched on this. That doesn't cost any money to pick up the phone or send an email or say, hey, my name's Maria, just want to let you know who I am. So I appreciate that. And then Maggie, which one of these kind of jump out to you, or which of the recommendations that we wrote so many months ago really kind of ring true to you?
Probably number three. I mean, I think that the untapped potential at the local level is really to kind of create those economies of scale. And I know that's something that people are really thinking about at times with tough budgetary outlooks. But we have grant programs that aren't going away, and they're just increasing the percentage that must be spent on cyber. So love the idea of the state being a vehicle for locals to achieve economies of scale in cyber.
Yep, and we've been trying to do that within North Carolina to make sure most of the IT contracts that we have are statewide and accessible to our local partners. And so whenever there is a NCLGISA conference, that's what we usually have some representative, a business relationship manager that attends those conferences to address those types of services. So if there's any question around whether or not they can use one, and because of the way our laws are written, it gives our state CIO broad authority that if a contract is not written to be statewide, he or she can deem it so if there's a great need. So again, allowing for those flexibilities.
And Maggie, to your point on that, with the cost savings and budgetary, that is a big one. You'll find, or I find that, from a local perspective, you want to have so many different, or tackle so many different layers of security, and you can only check so many of those boxes and look at so many items unless you're getting support through discounting, and that needs to happen. If you're looking at a statewide contract that can use that economy of scale, get that volume, get the number of user license up to a point that raises it. I've had plenty of conversations with business partners that a small municipality or small county may go to, and of course their price per seat is higher, and it's like, but they have the same concerns. And from a response perspective and Maria's responsibilities and looking at the state, it's the same, which just ultimately means they're going to have less layers of different security that they can implement. And so we do look to that to say, as Rowan's 13 on the scale, so we're not that largest urban. We have that challenge of being right there on that cusp of really looking for how can we have our number of layers of security at that cost savings. And luckily North Carolina does have that vehicle where we can use any North Carolina contract without bid, which helps tremendously.
So one of the really good examples that I use all the time, but it's in our paper. There's also a great write-up. The NASCIO Awards Library comes from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. They were able to roll out licenses for phishing training to all of their counties. They expanded the number of licenses that the state had. They were able to roll that out to counties at the same or very similar cost. In fact, it might have been a cost savings to the state. So when you think about that, when you're scaling up, everyone's thinking about that right now, right? That we're all working from home and trying to scale our infrastructures to match that. But I encourage you all to look into that. There was a question from the audience that really plays into really nicely, number 2, about states raising awareness about what it is that they offer. One of the things that we found in the state CIO survey from 2019 is only about 30% of states have a formal marketing or awareness campaign for local governments to really advertise what they do offer or what they could offer, and even less, kind of going to number 3 as well, really consider local governments or consult with local governments before a contract is put into place to look at the cost savings. So again, a question came about that, and Maria, you talked about, I think you said in 2019, you spent a lot of time, or it might have been 2018, you spent a lot of time, your folks did, going around to local governments and really talking to them about what the state has to offer. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. So as I mentioned before, we have the NCLGISA conference. They have 2 conferences a year, which is again, North Carolina Local Government Information Systems Association. Wow. See, I can do that so fast now. And so we have 2 each year. That's one of the primary ways that we're able to get in front of the local counties and the municipals. and we participate every year. There's breakout sessions that are there. We send our business relationship managers there to discuss the services that we have to offer at DIT. I would say one thing that we could do definitely better is to consult with probably Nicolgiza on some of the contracts that we're considering to see how that would benefit the local counties versus establishing the contract and then saying, hey, you can use it. I think it may help to maybe get some feedback as to what services would be critical, or that what's the greatest need, and maybe build that into our contracts as well. But I think that by and large, most of the IT solutions that are out there are common solutions that anyone could use and that they can leverage. But we again, going back to the Nicolgiza conference, we attend those conferences. We also are able to participate in panel discussions where we sit in front of all of the attendees, and we'll have sessions with our FBI partners, our Nicolgiza partners, our state partners to discuss services and capabilities that we have so that they can put a face to the name and start that relationship. So those are some of the things that we've done. And I've also attended the county commissioners conferences, as well as other local municipal meetings that they may have, Triangle J, to get in front again of those entities and let them know that here are some of the capabilities. You can use our contracts. From a cyber perspective, this is the services that we can offer you at no cost, those types of things. And I think the no cost generally gets to their ear first, because everyone wants to, including myself, get something for free. I would, but.
And Randy, if if the world were a little bit darker place for you and you didn't have Maria or someone who was really concerned with doing a formal marketing campaign, what advice would you give states? What are things that you think that local governments really need or really want?
Clarity. As far as I think the contracts are really good. There's a lot of effort that's expended in each local or municipality, just like you mentioned with phishing attempts and different packages. I'll say it seems like so much wasted energy to do the same thing over and over again. And and I hear this because I'm talking with my peers, and you almost want to say, it's like, okay, don't worry about that. Let's just do this. And that's exactly what we're doing with the eye sensor that Maria is going through. I mean, I've been at the locations, we've put it in, we've seen what it can do. So it's like, don't think about that. That's taken care of. So I think that's where, from a state perspective, there's a lot of resources that can go into looking at different solutions and coming up with different angles and testing to find out, and that can save locals a lot of time. And so having a contract vehicle, having that knowledge that's being put out. One of the other things is, and this goes back to Maggie's point about reporting, there's a huge benefit to sharing information. So from a state perspective, if you can get at least one or two counties or parishes, municipalities to provide information and get permission to sanitize that data and share it out, there's so much of a value into having an authoritative voice to what you should be concerned about. And that kind of goes back to the best practices, but at the same time, you have to be a little bit vulnerable and, expose some of the concerns that you may have internally. Hey, we need to really focus on the way we handle this type of solution that mitigates this particular variant of malware. And it builds that confidence and that trust that your state partners are engaged. They're really taking advantage of the depth of resources that they have. And I think that's one thing that we definitely see with DIT is just a wealth of subject matter experts across the board that can help. And that's where it really comes into play is building that relation and being able to talk to those, those SMEs and everything as we go through.
So one question that came in from our awesome CISO in Washington, Vinod, he brought up some of the newer resources and things that CISA is really trying to do to get engagement on state and local collaboration as well. Anything that you guys can think of, that any tools or anything that you're leveraging from CISA or from the federal government that kind of helps you in this space?
I would say, yes, we have a really good DHS rep in our organization now, and he has deep hands in going back into CISA. So I definitely leverage him for whenever we want, from an intel side of the house, if there's specific threats that we've identified and we want to know whether or not big DHS, if they've seen something similar, it's easy. It's very easy for us to reach out to him, and he's able to get us that information with a few days. Definitely, he is part of our all of our incidents that have occurred. He sits on our Homeland Security team. Whenever from an intel side of the house, he is key to everything that we do in information sharing, and he's partnered with us lockstep. Then, of course, there's the services that they provide from their RVA teams, their risk and vulnerability assessment teams. We leverage them all the time, and he is able to get us those resources whenever we need them, or at least get us in line to get those resources in. And he has been actively engaged in the local counties as well, going out with the teams whenever they go out to do training and awareness to what CISA has to offer. So we definitely couldn't do it without them. Randy, any thoughts?
Well, and I would say CISA also funds multi-state ISAC in a way as well.
Oh, absolutely.
And so, yeah, definitely with the multi-state ISAC tools, we take advantage of that, both on the remediation toolkits, the policies, matching the CIS controls with the Guard. There's been a lot of effort to find out and match, from North Carolina's effort. And that's really built a very strong relation between the Guard and Nickel Giza and the strike team is working through those similar findings of the CIS controls. And yes, I would completely agree. At the last event we had, the CISA and DHS representative came up and wanted to be a part of it. So again, talking about that snowball, once you get rolling, everybody wants to, provide input, and it's really great. It definitely helps. And it was so nice to be able to say, oh yeah, we're using this. This is how we're taking advantage of, the online forums, the community, the CIS controls. And then I think Maria had also attended with the conference that I was about this time last year. I just saw that pop up on my photo album. So that was a great opportunity to get with your state partners. That was a great outreach effort from Maria and her team to ask, myself from a local perspective, and get to talk a little bit more, to be able to take advantage of those opportunities to build relations and extend relations is terrific.
And it's good to know those guys, because then, if there's any funding, that's when you build a relationship with those entities, and you have that close-knit community, whenever there's funding, going back to what we talked about earlier about being, looking for any type of opportunities for funding lines and so on and so forth, they can help as well, because as soon as something happens, and if there's anything that's freed up, they're able to put you in touch with who the right representative is. I look at our DHS CISA folks in state as, one of our tools in our toolkit.
And there are a couple questions as we wrap up here. We only have a few minutes left. I can't believe it. Time has flown. But we will, audience, just so you know, we'll be following up with our great panelists, and we'll have questions sent out after this. So, but I want to end with this and talking about, although this has been focusing on, of course, state and local interaction, I want to really end on this concept of whole of state. So Maggie, Counselor, I will put you on the spot and ask, what do you see as the future this year or beyond, the future with whole of state? Do you think that the concept's going to be embraced more, or do you think it's going to be forgotten?
I think it's going to be embraced more, and I think Maria teed me up and maybe even scooped some of my comments here. But first off, I think once you've been at the point where you're exercising these incidents again and again and again, your mind's got to go towards what can we do left of boom, right? So I think some of the things she's mentioned specifically with the sensors and conducting additional information sharing, et cetera, are fantastic, and where I think a lot of states, when we talk to them, are now headed. I mean, makes sense that your foot in the door would be an incident, of course, but then how do we get in front of it? And then the other thing I think she mentioned too, that really resonated with me is even more inclusion on the schools. I'm thinking a lot about the schools right now as everybody's going remote. We're hearing more and more questions about what do we do in K through 12. So hopefully, reach out to us if you have good promising practices on that. That one's a challenging one. We'd love to hear more from states on that.
So last question, and we'll put Maria on the spot. Maria, embracing the whole of state approach that Maggie talked about and we've talked about here, do you believe that your state is more secure because you have embraced that?
Yes, I do. And I think the one concept that I hope that everyone takes away from this is that we're not the best at everything. And I don't think there's anybody that can say that or say it out loud anyway, because that's just asking for it. But I would say that the relationships that you have and that you've built will create that environment, which will help, we can share and learn from each other. And does education make you, does awareness make you better at what you're doing? Does it make you stronger? Yes, I truthfully, I believe that with all of my heart. And I think that as we continue building those relationships and continue learning from each other and continue sharing those information, we'll only get better over time. So to answer your question, yes.
I think that's a perfect way to end today. Thank you all so much for taking the time, especially while we know that states and locals are slammed dealing with the response to COVID, but I think it was a nice hour to kind of get away from that topic and talk about some other things. Mr. President, I will turn it back over to you.
Well, thank you all. All I can say about that session is wow. First of all, Maria and Randy, what a great example of leadership, persistence, and collaboration. I mean, thank you for setting that example for all of us. I think it's really helpful. I want to thank the National Governors Association and Maggie for the tremendous collaboration we've had over the years. I think together we've really raised the bar of cybersecurity, and we'll continue to do so together. And the last thing I would like to mention and thank Maria for her, not only is she running around North Carolina implementing the whole of state approach, but she serves nationally on the multi-state ISAC executive committee. So that's, I guess, in your spare time, Maria. But thank you all. What a great session.
Thanks, everybody. Happy Monday. We'll see you tomorrow.
As a reminder, you can find the publication in the NASCIO Resource Center at nascio.org. As I mentioned at the top of the session, all members have been added to a virtual networking lounge group. Please move over there and discuss what we've just heard and just say hello to one another. NASCIO loves to give away swag and host contests, and we will be selecting folks using the lounge to receive these prizes. We're also hosting a Twitter contest as well. Make sure you follow NASCIO on Twitter and tweet about the mid-year webcast series with the hashtag NASCIO20. Thank you for joining this session. I hope to see you in the virtual networking lounge or in one of the sessions tomorrow. Have a great evening.